I love ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. It is super simple, practical, and easy to remember at a moment's notice, all thanks to one diagram on page 6. And it's this one with the extremely fancy name, which is the Hexaflex. No fancy introductions, let's just get straight on with it in terms of what this means, and then I'm going to give you my own version of this as well, which is the Clarksashape, unless someone has got a problem with that legally, in which case it's just a joke, and I'll call it something else if you want. But anyway, the Hexaflex is a beautiful idea, and it contains 6 key points, which act as the 6 core processes of acceptance and commitment therapy. First up, we have contact with the present moment. In other words, being able to pay attention to our experiences in the moment and shifting our focus according to what is most useful to you there and then. On a practical level, this means narrowing and broadening, shifting or sustaining your focus depending on what is most useful. To quote page 6 of this book, which is Act Made Simple, by the way, from Russ Harris. It's really, really highly recommended as a book. And this leads nicely onto point number 2, which is all about acceptance itself. In keeping with contact in the present moment, acceptance here is referring to making room for anything that turns up. That might be thoughts, it might be feelings, emotions, impulses, associations, memories, and other similar things. The key point is that we are accepting them, not resisting them. No fighting, no running away, no wishing the experience was different. Accepting the experience for what it is. But what happens when this all feels a bit too overwhelming and you can't separate yourself from the experience? Well, that's when you need point 3, which is all about defusion. This means taking a step back and separating the thought or the feeling or the image. Instead of fusing with it and being one with it, you are defusing from it. You are stepping back to notice it and to see what it is. We already have this mindset of acceptance, and then we're not judging what is happening. We might still be guided by the thought or the feeling, but we're learning to notice that we're being guided. We're zooming out and we're seeing the bigger picture. I am having this thought. I am not just this thought. And that is the mindset for point number 4, which is self as context. This is just a fancy term for what I've just described. When I use the word I or the term I am widening it to mean the part that experiences and, more importantly, the part that notices. It's a bit of a tricky one to get your head around at first, but just think about it as, in one sense, you are watching this video and having thoughts about what you were seeing, and at the same time, you can become aware that you are watching a video and noticing that thoughts are arising that you aren't consciously choosing to have. They're just coming up of their own accord. And you might start to see how this relates to the 3 points we've already covered if you think about it in this way. And we're almost there now. So point 5 is going to be referring to our values. In everyday language, knowing what matters to us and what is important to us. These are the traits that you would like to embody in your desired future and ongoing present. And it's what will give you the guidance when you're unsure about what to do or how to act, which is exactly the final point, which is number 6, committed action. This is the idea of putting those values into action. You're not just thinking about what you stand for as a mental exercise, but instead using those values as a compass to effectively act in the world. You can't just think about who you want to be in the future and experience fulfillment and purpose and meaning. You have to actually do something about it. So, it's putting the values in action that will help to receive and experience this fulfillment and this purpose and this meaning, assuming, obviously, that you are actually in contact with the present moment and accepting what will come and so on. And it's these 6 processes that join together for a clear purpose, which is psychological flexibility. So let me just tidy all this up for a second, so I don't want the screen to get too crowded. But you might also see acceptance and commitment therapy and this diagram simplified into a 3-point summary or a triangle, which is just as useful, which is open up, be present, and do what matters. Or in other words, open up, which is acceptance and diffusion, be present, which is contact with the present moment and self as context, and do what matters, which is values and committed action. It's with this psychological flexibility that you'll be able to make those meaningful steps towards that fulfilling future, whilst also being able to manage the difficult emotions, experiences as well that come along for the ride. You might start to see echoes of this idea in my other video, which I called Why Are You Ignoring Who You Need to Become? In that video, I discussed the AAA method from this book, Creating a Life by James Hollis. In short, we need to keep in mind that a psychologically mature person isn't someone who doesn't experience negative thoughts and emotions, but rather still acts and takes action despite feeling the anxiety and the ambiguity and the ambivalence in the moment. Building this wider library has been wonderful for this, noticing how different books describe the same thing but in very different ways, and they all still point towards one thing, which is, in this case, how to create a meaningful life. And on that, I see absolutely no reason why I shouldn't throw my hat in the ring and explain some principles about how I've come to find meaning in my life as well. So, if ACT has the Hexaflex, then Mr. Clark's classroom can have the Clarksashape. Unless, like I said before, someone's got a problem with that, in which case it's the Clarksashape. Anyway, firstly, a message I put that out there all the time on this channel, which is Autobibliotherapy. Auto, referring to the self. Biblio, referring to books or library. Therapy, derived from the Greek, referring to healing. So, autobibliotherapy, self-directed healing via books. I firmly believe in the importance of passing on my original sources and where I found the information, and encouraging adults especially to learn to love reading again. Why? Well, that's point 2 on my little diagram, which is going to be endless curiosity. I love the term that Douglas Hofstadter uses in this very niche book, which is always very hard to recommend, when he says the term slippability. It's the idea that thoughts and ideas in general have a tendency towards slipping into each other and overlapping. I love the idea that themes in psychology and philosophy and theology and music and business and science and art can all cross over just by playing with some of the factors. And this lends itself quite nicely onto point 3, which is a healthy obsessiveness. It's one thing to be curious about something, it's another thing entirely to put that into practice and to choose something to be super passionate about, to the point of, in my words, a healthy obsession. So for me, at this point in time, that is extreme music, specifically black metal and to a lesser degree, death metal. But I've had a long history of other super niche interests, which I've gone all in on. Things like powerlifting and weighted calisthenics and running and art house cinema and various other subgenres of rock and experimental music and optimizing my sleep schedule and dinosaur classification and deep sea abyssal creatures and chess. And I could go on, but I don't want to bore you. But now it is building this 500 book library on self-discovery, inner work, and transformation. Or La Biblioteca, as it was affectionately called by a client, which I absolutely love. And this is all kept into balance with point number 4 for me, which is all about slow living and solitude. So I'm an extremely introverted person anyway, and I love the idea of doing 1 or 2 things very well rather than poorly managing and executing 5 to 10 things. I spend a lot of my time in solitude and I enjoy the process of introspection. I've always got so much to think about and links to make with, especially with all this reading, and the process of listening to full albums and discographies rather than singles has always appealed to me, so I like to slow things down to a more effective pace. This is especially useful for me because when I sacrificed this value back around 2017, maybe 2018, I gradually became so burnt out that I became a husk of the person that I used to be. And I temporarily lost a huge sense of my spark and enthusiasm and vitality. I don't want to repeat that experience again. So it's even more important to protect this idea now. And I'm happy to talk about burnout another time. I've definitely learnt this slower pace of life from a lot of people that I look up to as well, which is why point 5 on my diagram would be all about mentorship. I strongly believe that people can find a lot of meaning by 1, identifying those people that they look up to and admire, 2, identifying the specific traits within those people, 3, starting to practice those traits within yourself so that you can raise your own self-esteem, 4, realizing that you can be a healthy role model for others to look up to, and 5, practicing that role of mentorship and being of good service to the world. And that's important because that means at any given point, you've got a minimum of 3 clearly defined, healthy ways to find meaning. Admiring it and celebrating in others that you consider to be mentors, practicing it in yourself and living out a rich and meaningful life while being inspired by those mentors, and understanding how you can have a direct positive influence on that next generation by being someone that they can look up to as well. And with all that being said, let's bring it to a close with point number 6, which is be a paradox. So most interesting people that I know don't fit into clearly defined boundaries. They have hobbies and thoughts and pursue experiences that at first often don't really seem to add up, but that's exactly what makes them interesting. They are, in a healthy way, unpredictable. They're individual. Looking back, I've embodied this quite a lot when I walked to my job as a teacher of religious education in a Catholic school, whilst listening to very loud black metal in my headphones, teaching in a very quiet and subdued manner, especially under a visualizer, very much like what you're seeing here, and then going out to smash heavy deadlifts as a powerlifter at the gym. It doesn't really make sense when you say it like that, but it makes perfect sense to me, and that's what matters. So there you go. A little bit of ACT and a little bit of my personal philosophy as well thrown in, which I'll be constantly updating over time. Plenty of lessons to come, so I will see you in a future one. See you then.